I thank the chair. And I know all of us have former Chairman Dingell in our prayers. He is in the hospital with a little heart issue, but he'll be fine. He was quoted in the paper yesterday as saying, being old sucks. But please lift him up in your prayers. My first question, Ms. McCabe, is when fully rolling, EPA wants existing coal plants to hit a standard of 1,305 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. That is pretty aggressive. It's a nightmare for some states and expensive for ratepayers. But here's what I find more stunning. Your standard for new plants is 1,400 pounds per megawatt hour. In other words, your new rule says existing coal plants have to be even cleaner than a brand new one. People I've talked to back home said they've never seen this. They know that it's harder and more expensive to retrofit a plant than to build a new one from scratch with the best controls. Don't you agree? It is unusual to make these rules tougher for existing plants and new ones. Has the EPA ever thought it's okay for newer to be dirtier?
I'm glad you asked that, Congressman, because I've heard that and there's confusion about it, but there's a pretty straightforward answer to that, which is the difference between a standard for a new plant and a standard under 111D. For existing facilities, there are a variety of opportunities that the utilities have through the way they manage their fleets and the mix of fuels that they use and moving towards cleaner energy, which they are doing, to, on average, bring that carbon intensity down. And they have years to do it, and the averaging time for the standard is very long. It's measured in years or multiple years. A new plant under the Clean Air Act, whether it's a power plant or some other kind of plant, in this case a power plant, needs to meet that emission rate right away as soon as it's built. So if a plant started up in a year or two, they would be expected to meet that rate all the time on a much shorter term averaging time continuously. So they work very differently in a way that if you think about it that way, makes a lot of sense.
Man, people back home respectfully disagree, but one other question I'd like to ask with my remaining time is, according to IEA, current global emissions of carbon are somewhere around 36 billion tons per year, that ballpark. Others say it's closer to 40 billion tons per year. Either way, we know America is not the top source. As billions of people in developing countries get their first cars, their first light bulbs, it will keep rising. EPA's analysis says the rate approach to this rule will reduce carbon emissions by 232 million tons per year in the next decade. I'm just an old naval aviator who did math on a kneeboard with a lead pencil in my airplane. But my rough math says if we hit that goal tomorrow, we decrease carbon by 0.65% or 0.58%. The world's exposure of carbon will dwarf our reductions. The main reason for this rule is climate change. Is that correct, yes or no, ma'am?
Yes.
So how do you think this rule will impact global temperature?
No one rule is going to address the problem of climate change, Congressman. This is going to take a global solution. The United States is one of the largest emitters of CO2 in the world, and we have a responsibility to take the steps that we can take in order to help push in the direction of addressing this significant public health issue.
How does this impact sea levels, ma'am? Going up, down? I mean, how do you know?
Sea level is rising as a result of this global threat. This is a step that the United States is taking in order to contribute to addressing this global problem.
One final question. Am I safe to assume that EPA could revisit this new source rules in the future and that rules on natural gas plants might get tougher, like coal today? Natural gas lumped in with coal in the future? And could that happen, possibly?
Well, under the Clean Air Act, EPA is required to revisit its technology rules on a regular basis, and we're also, as you know, I think, looking at rules for the oil and gas industry, working with the industry on sensible ways to reduce emissions.
I'm out of time. I close by saying, go Astros. I yield back.